Okay, good morning. Welcome back to
Good stuff.
Sanhedrin. Who can remember the homework from last week? Oh, Julia, head girl Julia would always remember. Yes, come on, Julia.
Well, I've been trying to find out, work on answers all week. It's why Rabbi Steinsaltz mentions the reference to stones after to gems after the quotation relating to silver being as common as stones.
Correct. And have you got an answer?
I've got two answers, but I don't think that they're right. Although, funnily enough, one of them was actually indicated by Jeffrey when I listened to the Tanakh on the recording of the Tanakh on Sunday, because Jeffrey mentioned there that that the sun glints on silver, and because he was talking about, I think, attraction from the glinting on the silver. But I did that was my husband's suggestion, that the gems could have that the sun could have glinted on the silver, which made it look like gems. My suggestion is to do with how silver is actually located in the ground, because I think, and I meant to get it ready, but I didn't. But it has to be mined. It's an ore. I think it's in another metal. I think I read lead, but it was late at night and I don't remember. But I think it has to be taken and mined out of another metal, and that might be why he thought it might be precious, because it wasn't readily available on the surface.
Okay, so those are all very interesting things. And I'm not sure it answers our question, because our question was this, really, wasn't it? If we boil it down, the now I always get this wrong between similes and metaphors. I think this is a metaphor. The metaphor that is being used here is that the silver was so abundant that it was worthless or almost worthless, and the only thing it was worth was like a stone on the ground. And that's the strong metaphor that's coming through here in Divrei Hayomim and also in Malachim Aleph. And so our question was that it doesn't make sense for Rav Steinsaltz to say the king made silver in Jerusalem as stones, i.e., gems, which are, of course, the opposite of being worthless. They're worth a great deal. So, in the context of our metaphor, I don't think that really answers our question, although it's interesting to hear. Now, I'll tell you before I go on, I will tell you that I have thought about this for a long time this week, and I have come up with absolutely nothing. So anybody that can enlighten me
Johnny,
will be very good. Right,
Johnny.
hang on a
Johnny,
second, Jackie. 1 second. We're going to start with Johnny Halpern. Yes, Johnny.
Now, I told you on Shabbat that Avonim are mentioned with the breastplates as valuable stones.
Yeah,
So,
again, all of these things, there are plenty references to stones being valuable, but in the
yeah.
context of our metaphor, which is that silver was so abundant that it was worth nothing, that doesn't make sense. I mean, it's true that gemstones were in the breastplate, and it's true that silver has to be mined, and it's true that silver can glint like stones, but it doesn't make sense in the context of our metaphor. Let me just show you on the screen, just to remind everybody what
Can
Rav
I ask?
Stein. 1 second, Johnny. Just want to show you what Rav Steinsaltz has actually said. It's over here. Rabbi Yitzchak raises a contradiction. It's written in one verse, silver was not worth anything in the days of Solomon. And it is written in another verse, and the king made silver in Jerusalem as stones, i.e., gems. The Gemara responds, it's not difficult. Here, where silver was worthless, this was before Solomon sinfully married Pharaoh's daughter. There, where the silver was valuable, this was after Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter. I've just read that. I've just read that. One second, Jackie. I've just read that again, and I think I understand now what he's saying. And I didn't understand. I read it about 10 times and didn't understand it. I think I've understood it. Let's hear everybody else's, and then I'll tell you
Can
what
I
I
just
think.
ask you one thing, Johnny, to finish
Yes,
off?
yes.
In the Tanakh translation by Rabbi Steinsaltz, it doesn't mention, i.e., gems. I wonder why not.
Okay, we'll answer that as well at the same time. Yes, Jackie.
I'm a bit of a Kabbalist, so I believe in the power of the Almighty. And I think because Solomon, he, as a king, shouldn't have too many wives, too much horses, and too much money, the Almighty turned silver worthless and turned all his gems into stones.
Okay, that's interesting.
Can I put in a red herring?
Yes, go on. Let's have a red herring before we have an answer. Yes, go on then, Hannah.
A couple of days ago, there was an item on the news that said that the Chinese have found an incredible source of gold. And there's certain concern, not serious at the moment, but concern, what it will do. It is so large that it's likely to shake up the world standard of gold, which would go to the same as the silver was so plentiful that it wasn't worth much.
It would. You'd be able to buy it off Temu.
The item gave the impression that they found a really large deposit of gold, and it's enough to shake up the world economic system.
That's a bit worrying, since gold has always been the go-to
standard.
Yeah, the go-to. Very interesting. Okay, right.
But it runs in parallel with that silver was so plentiful that it didn't have value.
Yeah, no, it's supply and demand, isn't it? It's a law of supply and demand. The more there is, the less it's worth, and the less it is, the more it's worth. Okay, anybody else before I tell you what I've just thought of this minute, despite thinking about this for hours? Anyone? Julia, I think you've also just seen something from what you were saying. No? All right, let me tell you what I've just this second thought of as I read it again and I read it out loud. We have said, and this is how the Gemarah is understood, certainly by the Art Scroll translators. We have said that, and I actually, when I listened to the Shiur again earlier on this morning in preparation, I actually said last week that Rabbi Yitzchak was being pedantic here. That was the word I used. I said he was being pedantic because he was saying that on the one hand, a pasuk says it was worth nothing, and on the other hand, it said it was worth stones. And stones are not worth nothing; they're worth something because you could use it. And I said it again. I said it in the last week's year. You could use it as a paperweight or a doorstop, or something like that, or to put in your plant pots before you put the soil in. And I also said that, if you go to the garden centres, you can buy these very nice clean stones, and they're expensive. So they do have some value. And I said that Rabbi Yitzchak was being pedantic because he was trying to make a fuss between two psukim, one of which said it was worth nothing, and one of which said it was worth almost nothing. I've just realised that Rav Steinsaltz understands these psukim completely differently. He understands, and I've realized this is definitely the answer. He understands this second pasuk, not that Rabbi Yitzchak's being pedantic, that it's a difference between nothing and almost nothing, but the stones that he's referring to are gemstones which are worth a fortune. And so Rabbi Yitzchak is therefore entitled to ask a question, what's going on here? On the one hand, we've got a pasuk saying it's worth nothing. On the other hand, we've got a pasuk that says silver is worth diamonds, much more than its normal value. What is going on here, says Rabbi Yitzchak? And that is what Rav Steinsaltz is getting to. And I've literally
Agreed.
the penny only dropped, if you'll pardon the pun, the penny has only just dropped as I read that out to all of us again a minute ago. And I'm sure that is the what he's getting at. Anybody want to disagree?
So those stones are on him like the breastplate.
Yeah, according to Rav Steinsaltz, what Rebbe Yitzchak is saying is there are two psukim. One that says silver in the time of Shlomo Melech was worth nothing because there was so much of it. And another pasuk that says it was worth the same as stones, i.e. gemstones, i.e. it was worth a great deal more than silver is normally worth.
I don't think that's a standard interpretation, though, because Googling it, most of the Christian websites indicate that commoner stones is not worth anything. I think your interpretation is exactly what Rav Steinsaltz was getting at, but I don't think it's a generally held interpretation.
I agree, and it's certainly not what is in the art scroll, which I looked at right at the beginning last week. Yes, David Marks.
Yeah, so if we've got a contradiction between these two sources, there's also a contradiction between what Rav Steinsaltz is saying in his Gemarah and in his Tanakh, because his Tanakh just quotes Radak, saying there was so much silver it was as common as stones.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, isn't it? This is really fascinating. It's one of those questions that that you would love to ask Rav Steinsaltz. Sadly, he's no longer with us to ask. But there is a Steinsaltz academy or institute or something. I don't know exactly what it's called. There are scholars. I'm not sure if it's members of his family, but there are scholars who are continuing on with the legacy of Rav Steinsaltz, and they have this institute, I think it's called. I'll make myself a note.
I tried to find his son, because his son helped him to write this, I think.
Yeah, so I think his son is probably involved in this Steinsaltz Academy.
Yes,
I'll try and find the contact details, and maybe I'll send them an email and ask for their comments on this, because I think it's absolutely fascinating. And the point that David has just made, and I think somebody else made the same point about the Steinsaltz Tanakh not being consistent, is very, very good. However, there is precedent for that, of course. Even Rashi, the great Rashi, you will find whole books written on the trying to explain away differences in Rashi, where Rashi says X in one place and Y in another place, where X and Y are mutually exclusive. And there are people who've written all sorts of, I was going to say crazy, but all sorts of innovative explanations to try and explain away contradictions like that. So it wouldn't be the first time that a commentator has contradicted himself. Very, very interesting. And what's more interesting is this, that despite really looking at this for a long time, I didn't get it until I just read it out loud. And I'm sure that is the answer now. And what does that tell us? It tells us that those people, and again, something that I did not really appreciate when I was younger. You know, you used to hear about Rabbi so-and-so who's learned Shas 150 times, you know, or whatever. And you think, well, you know, surely he knows it by now. What's he going to learn it again for? You learnt it once, twice. You know, you can look at something many, many times and not see what's there in front of you. And you can look at it again on another day. And suddenly the penny drops. Really, really interesting. So that was a great piece of homework, which we ended up doing actually this morning rather than during the week. Okay.
Johnny, in the Tanakh, Johnny, he was just translating the pasuk. In this case, it's comparing pasukim.
Well, he's making a comment here on the Gemarah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that he doesn't make the same comment in Tanakh. You'd expect it to be consistent, because the two things are completely opposite. One is saying it's as common as stones and worth very little, and one is saying it's as common as gemstones, which is worth a great deal. You couldn't get two more different explanations, which is why we were struggling with it last week and during the week. So that's really, really interesting. That's made my day. Okay. It doesn't take much to make my
Don't
day.
forget to sell your gold shares.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to tell my Machutten that he's very happy with himself at the moment because he's heavily invested in gold and the price has gone up, so he's dead happy. I'm not going to tell him about this. I don't want to upset him. Right, what was the second piece of homework? Anybody remember that? No, you don't remember the second piece of homework, Julia?
No, no, I've been concentrating.
Okay.
I actually asked the grandson to ask his Rav, but he never got back to me.
Okay, well, the second piece of homework was around this piece of Gemarah here. I've taken it off the screen. Let me put it back on. No, why did I do that? Okay, there you go. This piece of Gemarah here, which I've highlighted. I'm a Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak said, "B'sha'ah nasa Shlomo et bat Paro." When Shlomo married the daughter of Pharaoh, Yarad Gavriel, the angel Gabriel came down, v'na'atz kanad bayam, and he stuck a reed in the sea, v'he'elas sirton, and all the sand and silt started to build up around this reed, v'alav nivneh krach gadol shebaromi. And on that, Rome was built. And of course, Rome is the symbol of the destruction of the temple and the arch enemy of the Jewish people. Rome is connected with Edom, which is Esav, Sonet, Yaakov, etc. So what Rav Yitzchak is saying is that when Shlomo married Pharaoh's daughter, this was the foundation of Italy. Italy was made by this geographical phenomenon of a reed being built up into a ground, and on it was Rome was built. And I asked the question, I wanted to know, how was the Italian peninsula formed? And I had it in my mind that it had broken away from the mainland through the straits of something or other. And as Michael Krauss is indicating by a very vigorous shake of his head, that actually is not the case at all. And I need to go back to school and learn geography. I never learned geography much at school. We only did it in the first and second year. We didn't do it for O-level because we had to do an extra language, and I did German instead. I would think geography would have been a lot more useful, but there you go. So, Michael Krauss, if it wasn't caused by breaking off from the mainland, how was it formed, Italy? Come on, Michael, teach us some geography.
It's just that I think I told you at the end of last time that it certainly wasn't that.
And
it was most probably a volcanic eruption or some tectonic plates moving around a little bit.
Excellent. So I actually did the homework. Again, only did it this morning at 6 o'clock when I decided to have a look and prepare for the shear. But the answer is, and I'll just take this off the screen so I can get my notes up of which tectonic plates it was. Hang on a minute. Where are we? Here we go. It was the Italian peninsula was formed through a long series of plate tectonic collisions, mountain building, and volcanic activity that unfolded over hundreds of millions of years. So there's your first bit of heresy, right? Hundreds of millions of years. My kids, when they were in school and they were doing geography O-level, were taught by their geography teacher, who had a very strong northern accent. He used to say, "You don't have to believe it, you just have to write it for your exams." Right? Because, of course, in Jewish grammar school, they weren't allowed to believe that the world was hundreds of millions of years old. It was only 5,700 and something years old. But This is how the Italian peninsula was formed through all that stuff. And if you want to know what it was, the African tectonic plate began moving northward and it collided with the Eurasian European plate, compressing the ancient seabed. This collision caused the land to crumple and uplift, initiating major mountain building events. And the mountains were formed were the Northern Alps in Italy and something called, which I'd never heard of, called the Apennines. Now, I've heard of the Pennines. Apennines. Well, it looks like Apennines to me. I've heard of the Pennines because they sit between Manchester and Leeds. But the Apennines, how do you say it, Jeffrey?
Apennines.
Anyway, the Apennines, apparently, which is the backbone of Italy, were made 30 million years ago. And what's really interesting is this. The Apennines formed mainly from folded seabed sediments. Now, how interesting is that? Folded seabed sediments. So the Gemarah is not all that wrong, is it?
No, 100% right.
Not wrong at all.
Exactly what it says.
One second. I'm going to come to you in a second, Sharon. I just want to finish this little thought. So according to this, the Apennines were formed from folded seabed sediments. The crust behind the Apennines stretched and thinned, and some areas sank, and other areas were raised up. So here it goes. In one sentence, the Italian peninsula formed when Africa slammed into Europe, squeezing ancient seabeds into the mountains, the Alps and Apennines, while subduction and crustal stretching created valleys, seas, and volcanoes, processes that are still going on. So if we look again at the Gemarah, you will be able to see that Rabbi Yitzchak's idea that this sediment built up and built up and built up wasn't entirely so far-fetched. We'll talk about the actual sort of metaphor, if you like, that Chazal are trying to teach us in a minute once we've heard from Sharon. You're muted, Sharon. We can't hear you.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm a little nasal because I've got a nasty cold. That's fascinating. I'd just like to add that Larry and I once watched about a 2-hour program on streaming television about the history, the geological history of Italy and all of its regions, and why it is that each region is known for famous kinds of foods or mushrooms or vegetables or fruits. And it's because the soil and the conditions are so radically different and come from such different origins, including the tectonic crashing, the subduction, and so forth. And if you want to get a really fascinating tour of Italian geology, there is a wonderful movie, and it's all related to how wonderful the foods are that come from that and unique, and why Italian food is different from any place else. Secondly,
First of all, before you go on to the second one,
yeah,
can you send a link to that film?
I probably can't. It was several years ago, but I think people who have better search capacities than I do can use it, can look for it.
We'll
It's a
have a look for it.
wonderful, mouth-watering, breathtaking illustration of each region of Italy and why it is so special and why the wines and grapes and everything are unique to Italy, which might explain why King Herod, when he was entertaining at Herodion, brought for the Roman emperor the wine from his favorite terroir in Italy, so that he should have that here, even though we were growing great wine grapes and making wonderful wines here. He knew the Roman emperor had a taste for the Italian wines that were apparently superior. Secondly, my question is, can we discuss who was Rabbi Yitzchak and why did he choose the angel Gabriel as the angel to bring this beginning of the end to our sovereignty about? Can we have that conversation?
Yeah, I think
Because
Rabbi,
I find it less interesting to say that the sandbar is actually a true geological history of Italy than why he chose Gabriel.
okay. So I don't think that we're really saying that this is a true geological origin of Italy, but it was interesting to me that the idea of this build-up of silt around this reed has got at least a grain of possibility in it. Why? Who was Rabbi Yitzhak? He was one of the Amoraim of the fourth, or I think fourth, maybe early 5th century. Why Gabriel? Because Gabriel is the angel of strength. He was also the angel of destruction to a degree, because he was the one that turned upside down Sodom. And this actually is ultimately talking about the destruction of the temple, which leads me, or to use a word that I heard about 18 times yesterday at a conference I went to, segues me into the next. I didn't like it either. I got fed up with it after a while. I thought the first time I heard it was okay, but by the end of the day, I'd had enough. Anyway, it leads me into the next bit, which I wanted to talk about, which was this idea that at the time that Shlomo married Bat Paro, the seeds, if you will, of destruction were sown. Because that's what Chazal are telling us, aren't they? They're telling us that, again, there will be those. I mean, I'm a fairly rationalist sort of person, I think, but there will be those literalists who will tell you, no, it's written in the Gemarah, and therefore it must be true, literally. And they will say that this is how Italy was made, and they will say that this actually happened at the time when Shlomo married Bat Para. As I'm sure none of you are buying that, I'm not buying that as meaning literally. It's a metaphor. And what Chazal are telling us is that this marriage of Shlomo with the daughter of Pharaoh, which is part of our problem with King Solomon altogether. If we know from our Parshat HaMelech, and Jack has listed them already this morning, the 3 things that a king can't do: too many wives, too many horses, and too much money. And the reason he can't have horses is because he would have to get them from Egypt. So the last thing that a king of Israel should be doing is marrying the daughter of the king of Egypt. So this was a very negative issue. And what Chazal are telling us is that what they're telling us is actually this was the beginning of the downfall of the glory days of Israel. The glory days of Israel were during the reign of King David and the early years of the reign of King Solomon. And then it all went downhill. And after that, of course, we know it went proper downhill with the splitting of the kingdoms into 2, the exile of the 10 tribes, and ultimately the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE. So what Chazal are telling us here is that events have consequences. Actions have consequences. They may not be apparent straight away, but actions and particularly actions from the top have consequences, and those consequences can be felt many generations later. And that is what Chazal are hinting at here. That's what this is my view. This is what Rabbi Yitzchak is telling us here. He's telling us that King Solomon did something that on the face of it, you would say, okay, so what? He shouldn't have married this woman, so what? Well, it's not so what, because he's saying that this sowed the seeds of the destruction of the temple, and sowed the seeds for an exile that lasted 2,000 years.
Johnny?
1 second, Jackie. And therefore, I think that what we need to be thinking about here when it's not just about learning the words of the Gemarah and understanding the words of the Gemarah and comparing it to geography. What it's here for is for us to teach us a lesson, and to teach our leaders a lesson, that their actions are not just actions that will have effect on themselves, that they have actions, like their actions have consequences on everybody going into the future. And I don't have to spell it out any more than that. Yes, Jackie.
On a very simplistic level, we have Solomon who just built the temple, and he was on a very high level with the Almighty. So why didn't the Almighty just say, "Don't marry this woman"?
Well, I mean, he did. He said it in chapter 17 of Devarim quite simply. How much more clearly would you like him to say it? Let's have a look at the psukim. I think we've got them ready, knocking about somewhere. I imagine there it is. There we go. How about reading this for us, Jeffrey, from verse 16 through to 18, please?
Only he may not acquire many horses for himself, so that he will not bring the people back to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. For the Lord said to you, "You shall not return that way any more." And he shall not take many wives for himself, and his heart must not turn away. And he shall not acquire much silver and gold for himself.
Okay, that's it. We don't need 18, actually. Yeah, well, that's pretty clear, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, Hannah.
Okay, you and I stand on different sides of this issue, but I'll say my piece anyway. There's nothing to show that the Gemarah is not right. Okay, the Gabriel putting a stick in the sand, and the consequences were many years later, can't be disproved. It can be believed or not believed, but it can't be disproved. And if you're a rationalist, then you should want proof of what you believe. That's number one. And number two is I have a different take maybe on the issue of what they're trying to teach us. Maybe they're trying to teach us that we just need to do what God says. God said, "Don't take many wives." And God doesn't want us to marry Egyptians. So just do it. It's not a question of our actions have consequences, which may be felt a long time later. But maybe the message is trying to be, if that's what God said to do, then do it. Or alternatively, if he says don't do it, then don't do it. And we saw very well, and I also learned something else during the course of the last week, that not only did he have many horses and wives and wealth, he was also to write a Torah on a little table modestly and not build a huge seat. And when the Queen of Sheba came, he built this magnificent seat with 12 lions and gold and 6 steps to go up, which was the exact opposite of what God had told him to do. So maybe the message that Chachamim are trying to give us is just listen to what God says and do what he says. Hello?
Or else
the temple will be destroyed.
Yeah, exactly. So we're saying exactly the same thing. Or else there will be consequences and the temple will be destroyed.
No, but it's not because of the consequences. It's because we're supposed to do what God wants. That's why he gave us. That's why he gave us the Torah. He didn't give it to us. I mean, you can teach a child without threatening him that there's going to be consequences. But God wants us to do what he wants.
Where is free will in that? Because we were also given the ability to make choices. Where do you allow for that?
Consequences are where that comes in.
Hannah, For every action, there is a
The way
consequence.
not to have the consequences is to do what he wants. You can choose not to do what he wants. But if you choose to not to do what he wants, then there will be consequences.
Well,
That's exactly what Johnny's saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't think we're disagreeing at all.
For
Not on the
every
second
action,
part,
there's a
anyway.
consequence.
I think we're saying the same thing.
And going back to
I think that in general, we don't believe the consequences. We don't believe that they're actually going to happen.
You
And in
don't
this
want
day
to
and age
believe.
especially, yeah, we don't believe really deep down that the war that's been going on for 2 years came as a result of our actions.
We don't
We
want
don't
to
believe that deep down.
Okay. All right, Jackie?
We don't want to believe. That's right. I mean, there are people that said the consequences of the Germans starting the reform movement, the consequence was the Holocaust. It depends what you want to believe.
Or what you want to read in our holy books. Yeah. We're being told time and again, and we don't, as you say, we don't want to believe it, and we don't. But in our day and age, we can also see from people who've come back from being hostages, say that when they turned back towards God, yeah, good things happened. But somewhere deep inside, in general, we don't really believe that if we don't do what God wants, bad things will really happen.
Oh,
yeah, it's sort of like,
let's just summarize this and then we'll move on. I think that's a bold statement, Hannah, to say that we don't believe it. I mean, I think that many people deep down do believe it. I think they have difficulty in putting that into practice and not doing the things they like doing, even though they know they're not right. But I mean, I can only speak for myself. But I suppose that's really what I'm trying to do with all the teaching that I do, is to demonstrate that actually what you're saying is correct, and to instigate an increase in belief. But actually, I think that many, not obviously not everybody, but I think there is a great number of non-observant Jews who deep down, I'm not going to, but I could name you a whole bunch of people in our Kehillah alone who are not particularly strictly observant, but who have a very deep belief deep down. And I think deep down people do have that belief. I think what the difficulty is bringing that belief to the fore and if you like, converting that belief into action and doing the things that the Torah tells us to do. And I think that's what Shlomo's problem here, because
Johnny?
although one second, Sharon, we're going to see in the next piece of Gemarah, if we get to it today, I'm not sure if we will, we're actually going to get to where Shlomo says, I am above all that. I believe it, but it doesn't apply to me. And I think that is where we go. Sharon, please.
Yeah, Johnny, would you finish the sentence? Because I'm curious as to a couple of things that were raised, such as people suggesting that because of Reform Judaism, the Shoah happened. I never heard that one before. But secondly, I don't even want to know that it's common thought. But secondly, you talk about people who may not be halakhically observant, who have a deep belief, but belief is a transitive noun, if there is such a thing. Belief in what? Will you finish your thought as to your understanding of what such people believe as and do they believe it through provable fact, or do they believe it through a jump from fact to the concept of acceptance without proof?
Okay, I'm going to deal with both of those issues.
Do you mind discussing that since you raised it?
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to discuss that. I'm first of all going to deal with the first issue that you raised, There is an opinion expressed in post-Holocaust theology that the Holocaust came mipnei chata'enu, because of our sins. This was a theory that was promulgated by the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum, shortly after the Holocaust. And he promulgated, actually not so much that it was Reform Judaism. There were other people that were that said that it was because of our lack of observancy and pointed to Reform Judaism. But the main approach to this was from Rabbi Teitelbaum, who said that they quoted the pasuk that we say in the Musaf of Yom Tov, Mipnei chata'enu galinu me'artzenu. Because of our sins, we were exiled from our land. And he goes on to say specifically which sins was it that caused our exile and caused the Holocaust, and that was the sin of Zionism.
Wow.
So that's the Satmar
Wow.
view. And then there's another view that says, actually, you're right, that it is because of our sins that this happened, but it's not the sin of Zionism that caused the problem. It was the sin of anti-Zionism that caused the problem. So, you pay your money, you takes your choice. And of course,
Okay.
But there is a whole range of theories that people have put forward, one of which was that the Holocaust came due to the sins of the Jewish people. And then various other people have said, okay, well, now let's have a look which sins could possibly have caused this. And everybody has their own political two penn'orth to put in. So that's the first issue. The second issue about belief is there are many people, many people who deep down have a firm belief in a creator, in a Ribono Shel Olam. They have a firm belief in a Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. They firmly believe that there is one God, and that one God is our God, and we are a special people to that God, and that we have a Torah, which is our gift, and it is our responsibility to treasure that Torah. And there are many people who have a deep, firm belief, but it is not translated as yet into their actions in observing the individual mitzvot of that Torah. If you look at those people, and I've got lots of them in my mind at the moment, I'm not going to tell you anybody's names, obviously, but there's lots of people that fall into this category. And if you look at their grandparents, they will almost all tell you that my grandfather was a rabbi in such a place, or my great-grandfather was a rabbi in such a place. And I'll tell you something else. There's a whole bunch of people out there. I remember we had a builder once who Sephardi guy, who was, you would not have imagined, you'd have thought he was completely and utterly secular. And I called him up one day to come and fix something that wasn't right in the house. And he said to me, I'll be there in half an hour. I'm just finishing putting on my tefillin. Well, I could have dropped on the floor to know that this guy put on tefillin. Nowadays, it wouldn't surprise me because I didn't know then. I didn't know what I know now, which is that there is a whole different world out there of how they express their beliefs. Some express them publicly, some express them privately, and this idea of what we would consider belief in God, belief in the Jewish people, Am Yisrael Chai, belief in Torah Yisrael. This is very, very deeply held by many people. There are others, of course, who say, I don't believe in any of that. I'm atheist, or I'm agnostic, or I am a firm believer in not believing. There are those. But I think that people would be surprised. I was surprised at how many people there are in this country, especially, who are deep believers. Now, the other side of the coin is that there are those people who are orthopractic, who are very observant of the mitzvot and don't believe anything. and are part of, you know, their lifestyle of keeping the mitzvah, being part of a religious Orthodox community, is for them, that's just their lifestyle. But actually, deep down, they don't believe anything. And there are again a very significant number of people like that. So I think that Hannah's comment that we don't really believe, I think that's a bold comment, Hannah, and it's not one that I can actually really agree with. Okay. Anybody like to say anything else after that monologue?
Going back to marrying Pharaoh's daughter, and that's the stone that the rolling stone that gathers no moth, so to speak. But that was only one, so maybe that's just a small part, because he married so many wives. That was Pharaoh's wife was almost immaterial. A marriage to Pharaoh's daughter was almost immaterial because of she was one of maybe 100 or 1,000 other women who were doing bad things effectively.
Yeah, I think it's the issue of Bat Paro. It's the issue of this. 1 second, Hannah. It's the issue, I think, of the alliance with Egypt. That's the problem that the Gemarah is pointing out here. The alliance with Egypt was not something which was considered by God to be a good thing, and when that was clear, Shlomo should have known that. Maybe he did know it, but was unable to overcome whatever desires he had for Bat Paro, whether it be political desires or physical desires. And it was the fact that this was an alliance with Egypt, which was not an alliance that we should have made. And we have a similar sort of thing later on with Manasseh, not Manasseh, with King Chizkiyahu, much later on. It's I think the Gemarah here is telling, Rabbi Yitzchak is telling us, be careful with whom you get into bed, literally and metaphorically. Yes, who wanted to say something?
I just wanted to say, I might be wrong because it's my memory, but I believe that Pharaoh's daughter was his first wife, and that may also play a role because she seems to have, from the literature, some special status, because he's the only one that he built her a magnificent palace. And the text talks about, or the text in Shmuel talks about how he built her a beautiful palace, and the palace is mentioned a few times, and there may be she may have had some special influence on him that at least I'm not aware of at the moment. That there's something special about the issue of Pharaoh's daughter. She may have been gone.
I think you're right that there is something special about that, and we're going to go into the Gemarah in a minute.
John, isn't it also written, though, that Pharaoh's daughter, when she came to Solomon, she brought instruments and she brought people with her that led to idol worship?
Yeah, correct. And I think that's what I think we're going to learn in a minute, and I think that's what Hannah might be alluding to. Let's go into the Gemarah.
Johnny, which Pharaoh was it? Wasn't King Pharaoh from Egypt, from Israel, was it?
Yes, it was the Pharaoh. The word Pharaoh is a generic term that means king of Egypt.
Yes, that's what I meant. Yeah.
So it is the king, daughter of the king of Egypt.
At the end of Solomon's reign, the text said that his wives turned him to idol worship.
Yeah, we're going to learn that right now. Let's look in the Gemarah.
That he was tolerant of it.
Yeah, let's look in the Gemarah. We're going to see it now. Have we got the Gemarah on the screen? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So Rabbi Yitzchak has just told us that Shlomo Melech did a bad thing by marrying Bat Paro, and as a result of that, Rome was conceived. Let's put it that way. Now, he goes on. He's not finished yet with Shlomo. He's really laying into him. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Mipnei ma lo nitgalu ta'amei Torah. What is the reason that the Torah does not reveal the reasons for most of the mitzvot? right? Most of the mitzvot were not told specifically why we're meant to keep them. Now, if you have a look at the notes on the side here, let's just read that together. Because when I read that, I thought, hang on a minute, that's not quite true. There's quite a lot of the mitzvot that we are told the reasons for. Anyway, let's have a look at this. And Rav Steinsaltz says the rationales are explicitly stated for some mitzvot, e.g. observing Shabbat. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them and rested on the seventh day. Dwelling in the Sukkah on Sukkot, so that your future generations will know that I caused the children of Israel to reside in Sukkot. And the prohibition against eating the sciatic nerve. Therefore, the children of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh vein, which is upon the hollow of the thigh. Blah, blah, blah. That's coming up in this week's parasha. Evidently, the Torah saw no need to avoid specifying the rationales for these mitzvot because they all commemorate events that occurred in the past and therefore present no risk that contemporary people would reason their way out of having to perform them. Okay, right, let's see what the Gemarah says now. So the Gemarah is asking a question. Rabbi Yitzchak says, why doesn't the Torah tell us the reason for the mitzvahs, right? Let's say, I don't know, shatnez, right? That's a real weird one, isn't it? Not wearing wool and linen together. What's the reason for that? No idea. Why doesn't the Torah tell us? Well, this is why the Torah doesn't tell us, according to Rabbi Yitzchak. Sheharei, shtei mikraot nitgalu ta'amam. There are two places, he says, where the reasons were revealed. Nichshal bahen gadol ha'olam. The greatest person in the world, i.e.,
King Solomon.
King Solomon, nichshal bahen, failed in them. And what he's saying is this. Let's go to our psukim. He quotes our pasuk, lo yarba lo nashim. Let's see what the pasuk says. Verse 17, Jeffrey, on the screen for you,
please. He
shall
not take many wives for himself, and his heart must not turn away. And he shall
Stop. So he should not take many wives, and his heart will not turn away. Implication that if he takes many wives, his heart will turn away. Now let's see what the Gemarah says. So the pasuk says, don't have many wives because they'll turn your heart. Amar Shlomo. Shlomo said to himself, Ani arbeh, I will increase the number of wives. I'll have a lot of wives. Velo asor, but I will not be turned away. In other words, this doesn't apply to me. Why? Because I'm the cleverest person in the whole world. Right? Well, he wasn't so clever after all, was he? Because look what happened. Uchtiv, and then it's written in Malachim Aleph. I think I've got that ready for you as well. Let's have a look at the pasuk in Malachim Aleph, chapter 11. No, chapter 10. There we go. No, that's not it. What?
Chapter 114, I think it said.
Chapter 114. There it is. No, that's chapter 11. Does it say 114?
I thought it did.
Let me have a look.
1 to 4.
11. Chapter 11, verse 4. Right,
Yeah.
Where are we? Let's go. I thought it was chapter 11.
Okay.
And I did get chapter 11 ready. There it is. Where is it? Chapter 11. There we go. Verse 4. There we go. I'm ready. Got it all ready for you. Yes, please read verses 1 to 4, Jeffrey, on the screen.
King Solomon loved many foreign women, and the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, of the nation about which the Lord hath said to the children of Israel, you shall not go mingle among them, and they shall not come among you, for certainly they will sway your heart after their deities. To these did Solomon cleave to love them. And he had 700 royal wives, 300 concubines, and his wives turned him away his heart. And it was at the time of Solomon's old age that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not whole with the Lord his God, like the heart of David his father.
Go on. Carry on.
And Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did what was displeasing to the Lord, and he was not completely devoted to the Lord, as was David his father.
Stop there. That's a pretty damning description of King Shlomo. And so if we go back to the Gemara, what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying is this was Shlomo's, I'll come to you in a sec, Hannah. This was Shlomo's thought process. This doesn't apply to me. I'm cleverer than everybody else. And so therefore I will not have my heart turned away. How many times have we ourselves rationalized things to say, no, that doesn't apply to me, right? That's for others, right? Not me. And that is what Shlomo did. And Rabbi Yitzchak is saying that the Torah gave us an answer, gave us a reason for a mitzvah, and Shlomo rationalized it away. And I'm going to come to you in a sec, Hannah. I've not forgotten you, but I want to do the second one as well, because
I'm patient.
Rabbi Yitzchak says two things. And the second thing is this, Uchtiv, and then he says, what about the horses? Lo yarbe lo susin. Let's go back and read about the horses then. Tell us about the horses, Jeffrey, verse 16 on the screen.
Only he may not acquire many horses for himself, so that he will not bring the people back to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. For the Lord said to you, you shall not return that way anymore.
So the Gemarah says that, Rabbi Yitzchak in the Gemarah says over here, that Shlomo understood the reason for that mitzvah because it said so in the Torah. You don't have to have many horses because you're not meant to go back to Egypt. And so what does he say? Ani arbe, I'll have lots of horses, 160 million of them, right? Velo ashiv, but I will not return to Egypt. And then later on, what do we find in the chapter before, in chapter 10? Verse 28 on the screen, Jeffrey.
And the source of Solomon's horses was from Egypt. And
Stop there. That's all I need to know. The source of Solomon's horses was from Egypt. So he says, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, not me. I won't go back to Egypt to get horses because I'm above all that. And we're told explicitly that he did. So the Gemara, and we'll finish here, but we'll just go to Hannah and then we'll finish. But the Gemara here, what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying is the Torah doesn't tell us the reasons for mitzvahs because we, as pathetic human beings, will rationalize them away. We'll think that we're above all that. It doesn't apply to me. I don't need to be careful, right? You know, it's our yellow line on the platform. I've not said this for many months, so I've gone a long time without giving this metaphor. You know, it's my favorite one, right? I can step over the yellow line because I will not fall over the platform's edge. Well, that yellow line is there for a reason, because, you know, you're not so clever as you think. You're not, you know, you're standing on the edge and somebody comes up and says boo, and the next thing you're on the tracks. Now, if you'd have been stood behind the yellow line then and done what you were told, then that wouldn't have happened. So the Torah doesn't tell us the reasons.
They're going over the yellow line now.
They are going over the yellow line. You're right. I've just
getting
talked
killed.
about that. Yeah, and that's what happens. You go over the yellow line. Right. So this Gemara, one sec. This Gemara now is finished. We're going to go on to something else next week. We're going to go on about writing a Sefer Torah next week. But the summary of this little piece of Gemara that we've done today is that even Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest man of all time, could not overcome his temptations, and therefore we, mere mortals, less wise than him for certain, need to be careful about being over the yellow line and listening, as Hannah said earlier on. Just don't do it. God said don't do it, so don't do it. Don't think that you're cleverer than God, because you're not. Yes, Hannah. you could have the last word.
Thank you for that last comment, because maybe I should have said rationalize instead of belief, because I agreed 100% with what you said about people who appear to be not so observant but have a very, very strong and surprising belief. So maybe the term should have been rationalized for each of us. But what came into my head was that we don't know the reasons for the mitzvot. I've often heard from rabbis that the mitzvot aseh keneged shasa gidim and mitzvot lo taseh keneged ramach evarim, which means that each mitzvah that we've been given applies to a certain function in our bodies. And we haven't been told what applies to what. I mean, if we knew that a certain mitzvah would heal a certain, or a certain avera would cause us a certain problem in our body, then maybe, I don't know, maybe God must have had a reason for not telling us, but maybe we would behave a little bit differently. But this has all been hidden from us, and we don't know what connects with what.
Okay, so I think that
we can only believe the rabbis that say that and know that they have more knowledge than we do.
So I think Rabbi Yitzchak has given us a clue as to why we're not told. And there's, looking at it from the other point of view, what Hannah is saying is that the positive, I think it's actually the other way around from what you said.
It could be. I keep getting the things mixed up.
Yeah, me too. I'm not 100% sure myself, but I think the mitzvot aseh are the 248, and the mitzvot lo taseh are the shasa, the 365. But either way, the mitzvot, the 613 mitzvot, are connected with the different parts of the body, limbs of the body, what have you. The idea being, I mean, I don't see that again, I don't see that as something which is meant to be taken literally. I think what that is meant to mean is that if you keep the Torah, you're in with your whole body and your whole being is elevated. But I would just go and say this: if you had that situation, Hannah, whereby every time you did a certain avera, I don't know, let's say, you one particular avera was connected with your nose. I can see you've got a cold today. So let's say every time you did an avera, you got a blocked nose, right? And you didn't like having a blocked nose. Well, you wouldn't do it, would you? And so if every time you broke Shabbos, you got an electric shock from heaven, nobody would do it, right? You had a thunderbolt from heaven. That's not faith, right? Pavlov's dogs would soon learn. So I think the element of faith, is very important. And part of that element of faith is exactly what Rebbe Yitzchak is telling us. And that is, God did not tell us the reasons, because if he did tell us the reasons, we'd mess it all up like Shlomo HaMelech. So the thing is, we don't know the reasons, and we have to have that faith. That is what being a believer is about. And it's about being a believing Jew and an observant Jew, because the two things are not the same, as we've already said today. Being an observant Jew should come from your belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your belief in the Torah, and that should be what makes you want to be an observant Jew. That's the ideal, and that's what we ought to be aiming for. And we're out of time as usual, and hopefully we'll carry on next week. But next week we are going to start over here at the bottom of this page here, the Kotev Sefer Torah Lishmo. We're going to talk about the mitzvah of the king to write a Sefer Torah. That is going to be next week's thing. I'm not going to give you any homework this week because I can't think of any, unless Julia, you've got some homework, Julia?
No, I've got a wedding and I'm flying to England. I haven't got time.
Oh, okay.
Work, so thank you.
No time for homework. All right, you're all let off homework this week, and please God, we'll carry on next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thank you.